My name is Adara McDonnell, and I'll be doing a presentation on voting in America. So in the United States, we have primary and general elections, which is a sequence of two public votes. Primaries are often held in the spring through the early summer, and general elections are always held in November. A primary is used to narrow down a field of candidates within a party. The top candidate from each party then moves on to the general election. The general election is the main election, and whoever wins this election wins the office. So there are many types of primaries. We have closed and open primaries, we have caucuses, and Washington State is the only state to utilize the top two primary. So now we're going to talk about closed primaries. So people may only vote in their own party's primary in this case. You must be registered with a political party in order to vote. In order to vote in the Republican primary, you must be a registered Republican, and same with Democrats. Independents may not vote in a closed primary. Here are some advantages and disadvantages of closed primaries. Some of the advantages are the other party cannot sabotage the primary, and only members of that party can vote. Some of the disadvantages are independents cannot vote. People who may have changed their political views but haven't registered with the other party also cannot vote. Now we'll be talking about open primaries. People do not have to be members of a political party in order to vote in an open primary. When you go to vote, you request a ballot for either the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. This is open to all registered voters. So now we're going to talk about disadvantages and advantages of open primaries. So some of the advantages are it's open to all voters, including independents, and voters have more privacy because they don't have to declare which party to be affiliated with. But a disadvantage of this is it can lead to crossover voting. So now we're going to be looking at a map of the United States and which states have open primaries, closed primaries, or modified primaries. Virginia, for example, has open primaries. When you go to the polls on Super Tuesday, you request a ballot for either the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, but you do not have to be a member of either party. Open primary states and some modified primary states are the states in which crossover voting can occur. So let's say one of your senators is up for re-election. You really do not like this senator at all. You are a member of the opposing party of this person. And you can go to the polls on Super Tuesday and you can request a ballot from their political party and you can vote for the candidate opposing them. So hopefully then they wouldn't make it to the general election. So now we'll be talking about caucuses. Iowa has the Iowa caucus, and it's the first state to have their primaries in the election season. So members of a political party come together for a meeting to decide and vote on who will win the primary. So instead of going to a voting location, getting a ballot, filling it out, and turning it in, you instead go to usually a very large location and you have a big meeting. You discuss all of the candidates and pros and cons of each, and then you go to different sections of the room, and that represents your vote. So in the picture that we see here on the screen, in the bottom right corner, we have voters for Pete Buttigieg. Bottom left, voters for Joe Biden. Top left is voters for Bernie Sanders. And top right, we have voters for Elizabeth Warren. If your candidate does not get enough votes in a caucus, you then have the option to go to a different section of the room to put in basically your second vote. But if your candidate does receive enough votes, you cannot switch. So in this case, Joe Biden voters will probably go to a different quadrant of the room, but Pete Buttigieg voters won't because they will have enough votes. So now we'll be talking about the top two primary, which is utilized exclusively by Washington State. All the candidates are on the ballot from all political parties, and the top two candidates then move on to the general election. So you could have two Democrats or two Republicans, two Libertarians, two Independents, two whatever combination you can think of is possible. It does not have to be one candidate from one party and one candidate from a different party. So now we move on to the general election, and we're especially going to be talking about the Electoral College and the role the popular vote plays in the Electoral College. The Electoral College is a huge topic and is heavily debated today. So here is a brief overview of the Electoral College. So it is a body of electors from each state who come together to formally cast their vote on who will be the next president and vice president of the United States. Most states utilize the winner-take-all method, except for Maine and Nebraska, in which it is divided by congressional districts. The Electoral College meets in December, following a general election in November, and the president and vice president-elect are then inaugurated on January 20th the following year. Many states also have laws that prevent electors from casting their votes that go against their state. Currently, the Electoral College is a hot topic and for many is controversial, as the popular vote does not always align with the electoral vote, recently seen in the 2016 and 2000 election years. So, how does the Electoral College work? The number of electoral votes per state varies and is contingent upon population. Each state is entitled to at least 3 electoral votes. The amount of electors a state has is the number of senators and representatives a state has representing them in Congress. Higher the number, higher the electoral members. States like Alaska and Delaware only have 3 electors. Larger states like California and Texas have several dozen electors. So now we'll be looking at an electoral map that was published in 2016. So as we can see, California has 55 electors. They are the state with the most electors. Texas has 38, and New York and Florida both have 29. But then you can see with states like Alaska, Delaware, the Dakotas, they only have 3 electoral votes. So you probably think, well, if the state has so little, they must not have that big of an influence in the Electoral College. And that simply isn't true. You need 270 votes to win the Electoral College. California is not going to be the state that determines that. Neither is Texas or New York. It's going to come down to these smaller states. Also, there are states that are safe states. You can almost guarantee that this state will go one way or the other way. California, for example, 99% of the time you can say it's going to go blue. But with Texas, for the most part, you could say it's going to go red until this last election when actually they thought that it had the potential to go blue. Then with these smaller states, they're often considered battleground states. You have Iowa, which is considered a battleground state. Ohio is a famous one. Pennsylvania is also one. In the recent election in 2020, it really came down to 5 states that determined the election. And those states were Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. Those states do not have populations like you see in California, Texas, New York, or even Florida. These states are much smaller, and those are also the ones that determined who won this past election. So now we're going to be talking about the 2016 presidential election. Donald Trump lost the popular vote by 2.87 million, but won the Electoral College and became President of the United States on January 20th, 2017. Hillary Clinton, leading up to the general election in November 2016, was leading in nearly every poll and survey conducted. She won the popular vote, but then she lost the Electoral College. In the most recent election, the 2020 presidential election, Donald Trump lost the popular vote by over 7 million votes, and he also lost the Electoral College. Joe Biden won both the popular vote and the Electoral College. He also flipped 5 states that went for Trump in 2016. Those states were Arizona, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Wisconsin. So now we're going to move on to an example problem on voting. So here is a brief introduction on this. In the United States, the Electoral College is used in presidential elections, which occur every 4 years, and the most recent occurring just last year. The Electoral College acts as a weighted voting system, since most states utilize a winner-take-all system when awarding electoral votes. Now let's look at how the Electoral College works in this mini country composed of 4 states and the outcome of their hypothetical election. So as you can see, we have a chart here with 4 states: Smallota, Madigan, Begonia, and Hugoto. The population of each of these states respectively are 50,000, 70,000, 100,000, and 240,000. Smallota, Madigan, and Begonia overwhelmingly voted for candidate A, Smallota voting with 40,000 votes, Madigan 50,000, Begonia 80,000. Hugoto only giving 50,000 votes to candidate A. For candidate B, though, Hugoto overwhelmingly voted for this candidate with 190,000 votes, but Begonia, Madigan, and Smiloto only gave a total of 50,000 votes to candidate B. So if this country did not use an electoral college, which candidate would win the election? So first we look at votes each candidate received overall. So we add up each vote from each state to get the popular vote. So it does not matter if candidate A or candidate B won in a state, both of those votes are counted. So we're going to add it all together. So to add candidate A, it's 40,000 plus 50,000 plus 80,000 plus 50,000, which equals 220,000. For candidate B, you add 10,000 plus 20,000 plus 20,000 plus 190,000 to get 240,000 votes. So candidate B wins. Or do they? So suppose that each state gets one electoral vote for every 10,000 people. We will set up a weighted voting system for this scenario. We will then calculate the bands of power index for each state, then calculate the winner of if each state awards all their electoral votes to the winner of their state. So each country will have a weight, which is based on how many electoral votes they will get. Smaller the country, smaller the weight, and vice versa. A quota will also need to be met for something to be approved, or in this case, to win the election. So to calculate the bands of power index, we will need all winning coalitions to be listed. For each coalition, the winning players will need to be identified. These players are the ones that basically ensure the quota is met. Then we'll find out how many players are critical. Then we will convert the counts into fractions or decimals by dividing the total times a player is critical. So now we will look at the electoral votes per state and see that the weights are 5, 7, 10, and 24 respectively, Hugoto having 24 electoral votes and Smiloto having 5. As you can see, that is a big, big difference. So now to calculate the bands of power index, we have all the weights and the quota. So to calculate the quota, you're going to add up all the weights together, and in this case you will get 46. You'll divide that in half and you will get 23. In order to win to be winning the coalition, you'll need to have at least 23. So adding Smiloto and Madigan, you will get 12. That does not meet the quota. Smiloto and Begonia, 15, again, does not equal the quota. Smiloto and Hugoto, on the other hand, has 29, and that surpasses the quota, actually. Madigan and Begonia have 17, does not reach the quota. Madigan and Hugoto, 31, reaches the quota. Begonia and Hugoto, 34, reaches the quota. Smiloto, Madigan, and Begonia have 22, and that does not reach the quota. Smiloto, Madigan, and Hugoto, 36, reaches the quota. Smiloto, Begonia, and Hugoto equals 39, that equals the quota. Madigan, Begonia, and Hugoto, 41, reaches the quota. And adding all of them together will obviously surpass the quota and we'll have 46. So what does this all mean? The critical player is Hugoto because it always meets the quota 7 out of 7 times. None of the other players meet the quota even when those three are added together, as it would equal 22 and the quota is 23. To put this into a percentage, Hugoto is critical 100% of the time. Hugoto also by itself surpasses the quota. All you need to win the election is Hugoto. So who wins the Electoral College? So as we know, Smiloto, candidate A, won as it is with Madigan and Begonia, so all of their electoral votes will go to candidate A. Hugoto, on the other hand, did not vote exclusively for candidate A, and instead they voted for candidate B, and their 24 votes will then go to candidate B. As we can see, 22 votes from the Electoral College go to candidate A, 24 votes will then go to candidate B, and candidate B wins again. Now, let's suppose that a state gets one electoral vote for every 10,000 people, like before, but now we'll add an additional 2 votes. So here are the new totals for each state when it comes to electoral votes. Smiloto originally had 5, you'll add 2, you'll get 7. Madigan originally had 7, add 2, you get 9. Begonia originally had 10, add 2, you get 12. Hugoto originally had 24, you'll add 2, and they will now have 26. We will now calculate the band's power index again and get a whole new quota, which is 27, because when you add it all together, it's 54. 54 divided by 2 is 27. Before we even add anything together, we can see that none of the states meet the quota solely on their own, unlike before when Hugoto surpassed the quota. So we know that there will be more than one state that is the critical player. And so in this case, adding all of these coalitions together, we can see that there are 12 critical player occurrences. So there is not one player that is critical on their own. Smilota, Madigan, and Begonia are all critical twice, or 2 out of the 12 times, or 16.66% of the time. Hugoto is critical 6 times, or 6 out of 12, and they're critical then as a percentage, 50%. Now, who is the winner this time? The total electoral votes that each state has changed, so the winner could also change. We'll add up the total electoral votes for the winner in each state and get 28 votes for candidate A and 26 votes for candidate B. So, candidate A is the winner. Now suppose that each state has one electoral vote for every 10,000 people, but now 2 additional votes will go to the winner of their state. So we will look at how many electoral votes each state receives that is based on population. So this is going to be similar to the original Electoral College problem. We can see Smilota has 5, Madigan 7, Begonia 10, Hugoto has 24. And then we'll add 2, as we can see with Smilota, they vote for candidate A, you add 2 votes for candidate A, Madigan candidate A, add another 2 votes, Begonia candidate A, another 2 votes. That means there's 6 extra votes for candidate A and only 2 extra votes for candidate B, as Hugoto was the only state to vote for candidate B. So here are the new numbers. Candidate A gets 28 votes, candidate B gets 26. So candidate A wins again. So, does a particular state have more power in the Electoral College? The short answer is yes. Hugoto has many more electoral votes than any other state by a lot, especially when electoral votes were based solely on population and no additional votes were added. When that was the case, Hugoto determined who won the election. Candidate A wins the most states, but they do not win the popular vote. But they occasionally win the Electoral College. They only win the Electoral College, though, when electoral votes are based on population and additional votes were added. So, is the Electoral College fair? Personally, I don't think it's fair, especially when a candidate wins the popular vote but loses the Electoral College, or when a candidate loses the popular vote but wins the Electoral College. Whoever is president should also have won the majority of voters. Some of the reasons for establishing an electoral college are irrelevant today. One reason why the Electoral College was created was because the Founding Fathers believed that voters during their time in the late 1700s were not fully informed for who they are voting for, and also lacked the resources to be fully informed. Today, that is no longer relevant, as the vast majority of people have access to information to be fully informed on which candidate they are voting for or against. Many also argue that the Electoral College provides a voice to smaller states, which is true. So, in conclusion, there are many types of primaries, and each state uses a different one. Open and closed primaries are the most popular, followed by caucuses, and then there's the Washington state that uses the top 2 primary, the only state utilizing that. General elections are held in November and are used to determine who will win the entire election and win office. The Electoral College plays a role in elections that cannot be overlooked. There are many arguments for and against the Electoral College system as well. Sometimes the system is not fair when it goes against the popular vote, which was most recently seen in 2016 when Donald Trump became president when he did not win the popular vote. From the problem I presented, candidates A and B both won twice, so to determine who the winner is complicated. Do you determine the winner solely on the popular vote? If so, candidate B wins. Should the winner be chosen by an electoral college? And if that's the case, how many electoral votes should a state have? If that is based solely on population, then candidate B is the winner again. If it is based on population plus 2 additional votes, then candidate A is the winner. Here are my sources, and thank you so much.